everybody. Welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Great show for you tonight. We're going to be talking all about vitamin B3, otherwise known as niacin. So stay tuned with me. We're going to be talking about what are the symptoms, what foods you can eat more of, how much to take, what drugs and medications interfere with niacin. There's some very common ones, and much, much more. So stay with me through the show. Now, if you're new to PDOB, Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain, say hello. Let me know where you're tuning in from. I like to see how far we're reaching, how many people we're reaching. As always, our mission is to save 100 million lives, and hopefully you're going to help me in that endeavor as I help you each Monday night. So without further ado, let's dive into niacin. So niacin is vitamin B3, and it's also sometimes referred to as nicotinic acid. Supplementally, you'll sometimes see it as niacinamide. So these are basically, niacin and nicotinic acid are pretty much the same thing. Niacinamide is really what's oftentimes referred to as a no-flush niacin. And one of the reasons why is if you've ever taken niacin, one of the things niacin does is it increases blood flow, but particularly to the skin. And so the niacin flush happens when you get, upwards of 250 plus milligrams per dose of niacin. It can cause your body to start to flush. And what happens is that flush, it starts in the crown of your head. So, imagine your head here. It starts kind of right here, and it kind of drapes down the head. Okay, and it kind of sends tingling, and it'll turn your face really super red. It'll almost look like you're having a reaction in the face, almost like a hive outbreak. Some people look at it and they think, oh my gosh, I'm allergic. But what happens is it pushes through from base of your head down through your face, then into your shoulders, chest, and it just kind of moves its way down through the body, creating, for the most part, a very redness in the skin. It can create an itchy-like sensation. It can also create almost like a tingling sensation. When I do a niacin flush, and I like to do them, periodically. Actually, different people have different responses, but to me, they actually just warm the body. It feels like almost like a hot flash for many people. So a lot of people don't like that flush. They're uncomfortable with it, mainly because they've never experienced it, or because they don't like to be hot, or because it freaks them out because somebody's looking at them and their face is beet red and they think, oh, are you okay? Do you need to call the doctor? So if you're going to do a niacin at higher doses, again, you get into that range of 250 plus. If you're going to do that, do it at home. Best time to do it is at home, and not do it and then go to the grocery store or hang out with family members, because they have a tendency to freak out on you if you're doing a flush. My wife used to yell at me. She said, don't do that during the day. People are going to think there's something wrong with you. Anyway, that's in a gist, that's the niacin flush. So there's a form of niacin called niacinamide, which is a supplemental form of niacin that you can take, and it doesn't deliver that flushing reaction. It's not as effective, though, either, so that's the drawback. So if you use pure niacin or nicotinic acid, it's very effective depending on what you're trying to do with it, versus the niacinamide, the no-flush version. So again, for effectiveness, this is your best form. For not flushing, this is your best form, so just depending on who you are. Now, what does niacin do? Aside from making your skin potentially uncomfortable and flush, what is it that niacin is actually important to do? So there are a number of different functions that niacin has. Niacin's a B vitamin. So if you recall, we've talked about a number of B vitamins on the show. In biochemistry, if you have an old biochemistry textbook, maybe you took biology in school, there's this term in most biochemistry, well, in all biochemistry textbooks, called NAD. That stands for nicotine adenine dinucleotide. We won't get into you having to memorize that, but NAD for short, or NAD, is niacin. It's vitamin B3. They just don't teach you that in biochemistry class. Remember when we were talking about vitamin B2, I said FAD is vitamin B2, and they just didn't teach you that, right? So my point is, this is a very crucial element in biochemistry, because NAD is primarily designed to help you create energy, right? And how does it do that? This NAD is what helps you break down carbs, fats, and protein, and then convert those into ATP. ATP is what your body uses as energy. So this is, in essence, for all intents and purposes, this is energy that your body produces. But it's very difficult to get to that energy, to get to this point, if you don't have NAD or niacin, because it's very hard for your body to break down, molecularly break down carbs, fats, and proteins. So you have to have niacin to do that. So again, it creates energy. Now, niacin also protects and repairs DNA. There's a mechanism that that we know about. As a matter of fact, I think I have a nice diagram. I'll just pull it in and show you. Here we go. Let's move you out of the way. So if you see, look at this diagram here. This is, so most of you've heard of glutathione before. Glutathione is the master antioxidant, right? So if we're really talking about glutathione here, and most of you have heard of glutathione, and you've done something supplemental, right? So like, for example, a lot of people will take supplemental glutathione, or will take N-acetylcysteine or NAC, because it's helpful to help your body produce glutathione, and glutathione obviously is glutathione, but NAC helps your body to produce glutathione. But glutathione is a lot like your cell phone battery. It has to be charged, okay? It has to be recharged, if you will. So once you burn through it, once glutathione is used up to protect you as an antioxidant, again, then what has to happen is that glutathione is used up in this process where it becomes oxidized, okay, and it has to be regenerated. So it has to, it has to basically do full circle and come back to here where it's functional. And in order to do that, you see this right here, what I showed you a minute ago. This is very common in biochemistry textbooks, is they don't say vitamin B3, right? They don't say vitamin B3. They write out NADP, in this case, nicotine adenine dinucleotide with a phosphorus group attached to it. And anyway, so my point is, when you see that NAD like that, this is actually niacin. They just don't talk about it. Whereas you can see riboflavin, which is vitamin B2, also in the middle here, is also required for glutathione. But this is why B vitamins work together. They work tandemly together. So you got vitamin B2 and vitamin B3, both responsible for helping to regenerate the master antioxidant that your body uses to basically defend degradation of DNA, RNA, and just generally your cells. Okay, so it helps to defend the functionality and protect your cells. And so that's what we're talking about back here. Okay, when we come back over here and say it protects and repairs DNA, it does so through that mechanism, through helping to regenerate glutathione, but also through the production of the antioxidant capacity of your cells. So very, very important. And by that same token, it's also known to help stimulate, let's change my color back, to help stimulate the immune cells properly. So niacin's important also for your immune system to work appropriately. And so this is why we don't want niacin deficiency, right? Just these three functions alone are very, very critical. Then we come over here, healthy skin. There's a disease where niacin causes inflammation of the skin, otherwise known as dermatitis. So if you've ever been diagnosed with dermatitis, niacin classically, it always doesn't present classically, but very commonly severe niacin deficiency, also known as pellagra, can cause dermatitis. And this dermatitis, a lot of times it looks like on the hands and feet like gloves and socks, because it has oftentimes has a line of delineation where the inflammation ends. So it's like you're wearing mittens of inflammation and you're wearing socks of inflammation. That's kind of the classic presentation of really late stage dermatitis caused by niacin deficiency. But it doesn't always manifest that way. Sometimes that inflammation's on the neck, on the chest, on the face, on the arms. Sometimes again, it doesn't always appear the way you might read about it in the textbook. So, and I've seen a number of cases where it didn't at all appear in that way. So healthy skin, niacin deficiency is notorious for contributing to skin inflammation. Also a healthy GI tract. So this is one of those that's commonly left out when we're talking about things like celiac disease or gluten sensitivity. There's a trap that oftentimes people get into. So what is that trap? That trap is you've got, let's define again what pellagra is, because I think it's important if you understand. Pellagra equals the disease state. It's the name of the disease caused by niacin deficiency or B3 deficiency. And pellagra presents oftentimes, what are known as the 3 Ds. So when you read about this, dermatitis, as I just mentioned, is one of them. Dermatitis is one of the Ds. Dementia, meaning you start losing your cognitive function. Dermatitis, dementia, and then diarrhea are what are known as the 3 Ds of pellagra. And then, of course, the 4th D is death, because this is something that can absolutely kill you if you don't figure out what's going on. So it's important to know that niacin deficiency classically, late stage, will manifest with these types of things. So a person will start to lose their cognitive function, so their brain, their thoughts, their ability to remember will start to decline. They'll have inflammation patches all over the skin. They'll have very, very bad diarrhea and malabsorption. And that's because, you down here, you can see that healthy digestive tract. Niacin plays a role in that. It helps generate the energy that helps the cells in the GI tract turn over properly. So without that, they don't work, and you start to develop that diarrhea. Well, what does diarrhea cause? It causes malabsorption, and that malabsorption leads to more nutritional deficiency, which leads to deterioration even further. So the way I want you to think about this is a lot of times what happens, in what I have seen in cases where people have either like celiac, which also causes diarrhea, okay, and also causes malabsorption, okay. You'll have somebody with celiac disease with malabsorption that develop B3 deficiency, then they develop diarrhea, or they have celiac-induced diarrhea, develop malabsorption, then develop B3 deficiency, and the diarrhea gets worse. So you can see how you can get stuck in a vicious trap. And if you are celiac and you're struggling in this way and you're not getting your nutritional values measured and tested, it could very well be, even if you go, so once when you're celiac, if you go gluten-free, you can go gluten-free, but going gluten-free doesn't stop the diarrhea. It won't stop the diarrhea if the malabsorption led to a vitamin B3 deficiency. You will still be vitamin B3 deficient and continue to have diarrhea. And so some people going gluten-free that have been celiac disease continue to struggle because their doctors don't have the knowledge, the nutritional background to check them appropriately for these deficiencies. And so they end up in this trap where they think they've changed their diet, or they know they've changed their diet, and they think they should feel better as a result of that, but they continue to struggle until the greater and greater disease continues to be more and more pervasive. And you want to try to avoid that, because again, that 4th D, right? We don't want this, obviously. I mean, we don't want that 4th D of pellagra. So very important a lot of times, again, with people with gluten sensitivity, because niacin deficiency can cause malabsorption and gluten can cause damage to the gut that causes malabsorption. There's this overlap, and people can get trapped in that middle. We also know that niacin regulates cholesterol. Now, if you're a fan of cholesterol, of checking cholesterol and worrying about cholesterol, I'm not. And I don't have time to get into that tonight. I think high cholesterol is one of the biggest myths in the healthcare arena ever been perpetuated by mainstream medicine. That's my opinion, and you can check more out about that if you're hearing this for the first time and it's like, what do you mean not looking at cholesterol? I have a video called The Cholesterol Myth. You can go back and check that out in one of my past shows. But niacin lowers cholesterol. It's actually, as a drug, niacin has actually been, it's been put into prescription drug form. There are several different versions of prescription niacin. Why? Doctors are now using it to lower cholesterol. Because niacin, what does it do? Let's make some room here. Niacin can reduce LDL. It can reduce VLDL. Now, LDL is oftentimes what doctors refer to as bad cholesterol. I don't believe LDL is bad. Again, we're not going to get into that tonight. VLDL would, it stands for very low density lipoprotein, but very bad is what we're going to, very bad cholesterol. So it lowers these two. Niacin has also been shown to lower triglycerides. So if you struggle with elevation in triglycerides are fat in your bloodstream. We know that niacin can lower triglycerides. We know that it can also, let's reverse that arrow, it can increase your HDL, which is, again, referred to as good cholesterol. So this is like the dream tool, right? Because, if you look at like statins, for example, which are the drugs most doctors use, basically they work on lowering your LDL and VLDL, but they don't really affect your triglycerides or your HDL. So niacin does all of those things. It lowers these, it elevates this one, and it lowers that one. So again, and it's a vitamin, right? So there are really no tremendous toxicities for niacin. Now, if you start getting really, really high doses beyond 1,000 milligrams a day, just like statins, when you're on a statin, your doctor wants to check your liver enzymes to make sure it's not damaging your liver. Same thing, too much niacin for too long a period of time can elevate liver enzymes. So again, if you're taking this route, you should know that. Ask your doctor to make sure that that's being monitored, because if your liver's taking on damage, whether you're on the medicine or whether you're on the vitamin, it's still not a good thing. We don't want that to happen to you. So LDL, VLDL, triglycerides, and HDL. So keeps these things in check, and then it helps with the stimulation of growth hormone. Now, this is an indirect mechanism, so how does it do that? It does it by doing this. So if your triglycerides are high, so lowering your triglycerides helps by default increase and improve growth hormone secretion, because elevated triglycerides, so high triglycerides, so if we reverse this, high triglycerides inhibit growth hormone secretion. This is why people that are obese, that have high triglyceride levels, have a really hard time with exercise, because their muscles are breaking down. They're trying to exercise, but they're not making growth hormone that's going to help them heal and repair from that exercise. So it's important that we don't have high triglycerides. So when you're running that test, or you're asking your doctor to run that test, oftentimes the new lab reference ranges, the newer ones, will tell you that 150 or less is normal. I would say scratch the 150, look at it, try to get it to 75 or less in terms of your total triglyceride count, so that, again, that you're maximizing your ability to produce and secrete growth hormone. And then we also have development and the protection of the nervous system. There are massive studies on niacin in the brain and the nervous system, and a lot of it has to do with the role that niacin plays in producing or helping. Niacin can help in multiple kinds of reactions. About 400 chemical reactions that we know that niacin helps with, and many of those are neuroprotective. And actually, one of my, he doesn't know it, he passed away. He was one of my mentors, meaning I read everything he ever wrote. I read all of his books, but his name was Abram Hoffer. He was a brilliant psychiatrist, and he found that by using niacin, by using high-dose niacin in patients with schizophrenia, many of them improved dramatically, right? So he hypothesized there was a substance in the brains of schizophrenics called adrenochrome. They produce too much of it. Adrenochrome is a byproduct of adrenaline. And he hypothesized that vitamin B3 and vitamin C would help to reduce that aggressive adrenochrome, because this adrenochrome is a hallucinogen, so it creates like a hallucinogenic effect. And so he used in many of his patients vitamin B3 in high doses, vitamin C in high doses, reduced that and reduced their hallucinations and improved their sanity. And he was one of the first to ever do this. Actually, he was the first to ever do this, and he wrote a number of papers, a number of research studies, and he published a lot of research. He's actually one of the doctors who created the double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trial. And he's got a very interesting story, Dr. Hoffer. But very, very brain protective niacin in schizophrenia, but not just schizophrenia. We also see there's a lot of research that shows that niacin is protective in diseases like Huntington's chorea, which is a genetic type of neurological degeneration. We see it being beneficial in dementia, Alzheimer's disease, beneficial in things like multiple sclerosis. So niacin is very, very important for the proper protection of the nervous system. So we don't want to be low in it. That's kind of the key takeaway, right? Is we do not want to become niacin deficient. There's way too many very important functions. And there's some research now ongoing about niacin and how certain forms of niacin actually help slow down the aging process. I think it's too early to call that. I think it's too early to make any kind of judgment on some of that, but there's some fascinating research going on in the realm of niacin. So let's talk a little bit more about pellagra or even pre-pellagra, right? So like think of this not as just pellagra, because pellagra, what is pellagra? It's end-stage disease. End stage, what does that mean? End stage is where the disease is very advanced and very progressed. What about pre-pellagra? This is some of the symptoms that you might develop before you get to the severity of dermatitis and the severity of cognitive decline or diarrhea. So some of these things here might happen kind of pre that. So we look at hair loss is an example of a symptom that niacin deficiency can cause. So if you're struggling with hair loss and don't know why, get your niacin levels measured. Mouth sores. We see the same thing, by the way, tongue inflammation like glossitis or swelling of the tongue and mouth sores. Vitamin B2 will also do this. So will iron deficiency. And so will vitamin B6 deficiency too. So these kind of three, and it's interesting because these three work together. So remember, niacin is vitamin B3, right? And so B2, B3, iron, and B6 all work together in tandem to help with the protection of the oral cavity. So mouth sores, tongue inflammation, known to be caused by those deficits. Weakness and fatigue. This is probably, in my experience, one of the earliest to detect. And it's a vague set of symptoms, right? What is it? Weakness and fatigue. You're just tired all the time. And you know, this is one of the reasons why people feel better when they take a B complex. When you struggle with kind of constant fatigue, even though you're eating right, you're sleeping well, you're doing everything well, right? And you take that B complex, which has got B2 and it's got B3 and it's got B6, and you start feeling better. Your energy levels can actually come up. Your strength can start to return. Your stamina can start to return. So again, weakness and fatigue, very early symptom, not so much a late stage. And then we've got anxiety, depression, and mood swings. Now, something that's interesting about vitamin B3, so all vitamins and all minerals are what we would deem to be essential. What does essential mean? Essential means you can't survive without it. That's what we mean when we say essential vitamin or essential nutrient. Your body cannot sustain its function without that nutrient. And so essential means that, in essence, you have to eat it. Your body can't synthesize it. Now, niacin is different in this regard because your body can actually synthesize niacin. It can make it if you have enough tryptophan. Now, you may have heard of this before, right? Tryptophan, it's in the turkey at Thanksgiving. It's, you know, what is kind of always talked about as that containing the ingredient that helps make people sleepy and tired, right? When they eat that turkey with rich in tryptophan. We can actually, humans, can make niacin from tryptophan. So we can convert tryptophan to niacin. So technically, niacin's essential, but it's less essential because our body does have a way, if we're getting enough tryptophan, to get adequate to produce niacin. The problem with the conversion is that conversion is inefficient. And so what happens is it depends, right? So like it's very inefficient if you're following vegetarian diet. And there are a number of reasons why, but it's less efficient when you're following a plant-based and all plant-based diet, more specifically vegan diet, not like a lacto or an ovo-vegetarian or a pesca-vegetarian, but more specifically vegan. That process becomes less efficient. In part, it's because your protein needs are potentially not being met as adequately, and tryptophan is predominantly found in meat as a source of food in the diet. So again, that's not to say you can't do it on a vegetarian diet, but it is something to look out for. Now, you can make tryptophan, or you can convert tryptophan into niacin. It's inefficient here. It's also inefficient when you have, even if you eat meat, even if you aren't vegetarian per se, but if your protein counts are too low. So if you're eating less protein than what your body requires. We'll see this a lot in people that are athletes or that aggressively work out and they won't hit their protein high enough. We'll start to see hair loss. That'll be one of the first symptoms. We'll start to see the weakness and the fatigue set in, right? And part of that is because of this conversion, and part of that is because they need more protein to heal and repair the muscles that are being damaged through the working out, and they're not getting adequate quantities of that. So, and remember, your hair's a protein, and so that is going to play a role there. But anyway, the tryptophan can convert into niacin. There's a long pathway, biochemical pathway, where the body is capable of doing that, but it's inefficient with certain kinds of diets. It also can be very inefficient overall anyway. So even if you're not even a vegetarian, it can be an inefficient process where the conversion is 60-1. So, 60 to 1 is a conversion, and some people say that conversion process is very slow and it doesn't work very quickly. So this is why we consider vitamin B3 really to be essential, because even though we could get it from tryptophan, we can't get enough, right? And you get into certain situations like pregnancy or breastfeeding ladies or guys, heavy aggressive workouts, where you're not going to get adequate or high speed enough conversion for this to happen effectively without actually getting foods that are rich in niacin. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Other symptoms of niacin deficiency: gas, bloating, indigestion. So before the major diarrhea sets in, you get the early symptoms of gas, bloating, and indigestion. That looks like a typo there. That should be an I. Okay. And then numbness and tingling, numbness in the pain, hands and feet. So this is the neuropathy, right? B vitamin deficiencies, not just niacin, but B2 and B6 and B12 and folate, they can all cause numbness and tingling in the hands and feet and pain in the hands and feet. It's very common for B vitamin deficiencies to cause that. And then again, we get over here into the later stages: diarrhea, okay, skin inflammation, which we talked about, mental confusion and dementia can start to develop. We'll see oftentimes too migraine-like headaches, photosensitivity, and there's actually interesting that we won't. It's too confusing biochemically. We won't get into that. But light sensitivity, meaning when you go outside and you try to look, you have to wear sunglasses, or you have to keep your eyes protected with a ball cap or something because you're super sensitive to light. Well, this can all happen. Skin sensitivity to sunlight can also happen as a result of niacin deficiency as well. So these are kind of the bulk of symptoms. These ones right down here on the bottom are really kind of your later stage, more advanced things to look out for. And we talked about this diagram already. We talked about the function, the regenerative capacity of niacin and its important role in regulating glutathione. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the causes of niacin deficiency. So now you know what the symptoms are. Let's talk about some of the causes. One of them is alcoholism. And so alcohol will definitely contribute to a loss of niacin. Alcohol also is a gastric irritant, so you deplete the vitamin that's necessary to retain the integrity of the GI tract, but then you're adding a toxin that can damage the GI tract. This is why we see alcoholics are as a general rule, much more prone to developing of niacin. Now, I wanted to give you a history lesson here because a lot of books will say that grains are a great food source for niacin. The problem with grain is the niacin is it's very low bioavailability. This is very hard to get to that niacin. And what happens, and so like, again, history lesson, the existence, meaning surviving on maize, which is corn, and surviving on sorghum, which is another grain. And although technically they like to call sorghum gluten-free, technically it's not gluten-free. But again, existence on maize or sorghum diets and loss of failure to isolate niacin from them led to pellagra incidents in India, South Africa, Southern Europe, okay, and in the USA following the Civil War. Is actually one of the reasons we know so much about niacin was because post-Civil War in the South, a lot of the food was either like your grain, your cereals, like your grits, your corn, right, or gravy, wheat. And so it was a huge grain subsistence post-Civil War. There was famine, there was poverty post-Civil War. And so some really smart physicians picked up on that, and they started to isolate and identify that there was a B3 deficiency, and a big part of it was grain-based foods. This is actually part of that grain, by law, has to be fortified. If you're buying packaged grain, it has to be fortified, or they can't sell it. It's illegal to sell it if it's not fortified. Why? Well, this is one of the reasons why. Pellagra. Because grain would cause niacin deficiency. It would also cause vitamin B1 deficiency and lead to the disease beriberi. So these two diseases were responsible for, roughly 8,000 deaths a year, and a lot of hospitalizations and a lot of illness. So that is why we have fortification laws. When you pick up a box of cereal or a loaf of bread, you'll always see niacin on the label. Have to. You'll see thiamine, which is vitamin B1. You'll see niacin and thiamine. Those two will be on every single package because it's illegal to sell them, because grain was so toxic, it was responsible for more than 8,000 deaths a year. A lot of people don't realize that about our history, but it's very, very true and very, very sad. And this is one of the reasons, not the only reason why I'm a proponent of a grain-free diet, but one of the very, very big ones is that the aspects of vitamins within those grains is very poorly bioavailable, especially when we're talking about processed foods, processed grains. So let's talk about food. Actually, let's back up just a minute. Before I dive into this food, that's pretty relatively easy. Let's talk about causes of niacin deficiency as well. So let's change the color, make it more visible for you. Causes of niacin or vitamin B3 deficiency. So we mentioned alcohol already. So what else? There's a number of different medicines that can cause vitamin B3 deficiency. Antibiotics is a class of medicine, and tuberculosis antibiotics. So any of those of you who ever had to take isoniazid, which is a anti-tuberculosis medicine, causes vitamin B3 deficiency. We also know that antacids, they reduce stomach acid, and we need acid to absorb niacin. So antacids, so if you're popping Tums, Rolaids, drugs like that, you got to be careful, because you're going to potentially increase the risk of developing this type of deficiency. And then we also have, ladies, BCP, right? Estrogen. Estrogen will burn through and help to deplete not just B3, it also does that to B2, B6, magnesium, and zinc. But estrogen can cause, so if you're on a prescription estrogen medication, if you're on any of these things, and you're on them for good reasons, although I would argue the reasons, but again, that's between you and your doctor. But if you're on them, you need to check. You need to have this measured. You need to have this checked, because a lot of these same diseases that cause these types of symptoms or that require the drugs to treat. So again, let's go back and look at this for a minute. So if you're having constant digestive problems, oftentimes doctors will pull out antibiotics and say, oh, you must have a stomach bug, let's treat it with antibiotics, right? And if it's not a stomach bug, and if it's really a niacin deficiency, and they put you on an antibiotic and it makes your niacin deficiency worse, what have you just done? Same thing with anxiety. A lot of doctors will write prescription drugs, and sometimes with anxiety, depression, or mood swings, they'll use estrogen, right? In females, if you're having menstrual complaints and things of that nature that are accompanied by those types of symptoms, estrogen is a common prescription given when you're having those kinds of symptoms. And that also, again, what if it's not necessarily that as a problem? What if it's vitamin B3 deficiency leading to those symptoms? And so now you're on a drug that's leading to a deficiency of the nutrient, that a deficiency that's causing you to actually feel the way that you're feeling. So we could really draw correlations around the board for many of these different symptoms. That's my point. This is why, look, I'm of the opinion that medicine Doesn't solve chronic problems. Medicine can solve acute problems. If you have an acute fulminant infection that's going to go, and hit your bloodstream and kill you, take the antibiotic. But if you've got heartburn because you eat like garbage, there's no justification or reason to pump antacids into you, because you're just going to continue to feel like garbage, but you're going to create more problems. Same thing here. If you've got hormone imbalance because you eat poorly, because you have bad lifestyle choices or habits, and you don't even know that there's a correlation because your doctor didn't spend that time, right? Remember, this is not going to solve your problem. These passive drugs don't solve anybody's problem. They just mask the symptoms and give you a false sense of security. And so really, if you want your health back, you have to take proactive action to understand these things, and you've got to get educated, and you've got to have more meaningful conversations with your doctor, or find doctors that will. Okay, let's talk about some of the food sources. Non-grain based, right? So again, important that we're delineating the best gluten and grain-free sources of niacin. You can see by far on the top here is meat: seafood, beef, chicken, turkey, lamb, salmon, tuna, shrimp, sardines. And then, for those of you who are following a vegetarian diet, I've tried to list some really good sources down here for you as well. Okay, so mushrooms, asparagus, bell peppers, sweet potatoes, sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, and almonds. So no matter who you are, you've got some good options here, again, to get lots of niacin from your diet. Remember, the best place to get any nutrient is from the food that we eat. The problem in today's world is most of the food that we eat is contaminated with antibiotics, contaminated with, with pesticides, which act as antibiotics. And, in addition to that, the food oftentimes is not organic, it's highly processed, and in the processing, a lot of the nutrients are destroyed. And so we're left with something of a skeleton of what the food could have provided nutritionally. And so, again, when you're going at food-based sources to get your nutrients, it's important that it's real food, right? Not processed. Because I can tell you this, if you buy, chicken lunch meat that's, that's basically adhered or stuck together using meat glue, that's not going to be as nutrient dense as eating a real chicken, like a fresh baked chicken. So again, it's not processed is the key word. So, again, same thing with your beef. If you're going over to the taco place, the place that has grade F meat, right? And most of it's not really meat, but it's other stuff. That's processed. That's not going to help you get this to any great degree. So again, not processed is the way that you want to think about it. Remember, what you fuel your body with is how your body responds. So when you put garbage in, you get garbage out. It's a general rule. It's what we call a non-negotiable rule of nutrition. You can't expect to get good health by putting bad things in. So that's a wrap for niacin. Let's dive into your questions. So let's see what we got tonight. Is there a test to show deficiency of vitamin B3? Yeah, absolutely. There's several, but some of them are pretty complex. The best one, honestly, the best one that we want to just ask for it, and hopefully your doctor can figure it out. If your doctor's not trained in nutrition, I recommend you follow up with someone who is. But you've heard me mention this term, if you've watched my show for any length of time. Lymphocyte proliferation is a great way to measure internal cellular storage of niacin. This is the most accurate way to really look at your niacin levels. So this is what I would recommend if you're getting with your doctor to run a test. Ask your doctor to run a lymphocyte proliferation test to look at niacin. Let's see, what else do we got here? Go back up just a hair. No, keep going. Is anyone? Oh, somebody asking about Polyface Farm. So yeah, if you want to come and visit me and hang out in Virginia, I'm actually going to be in Virginia here in a number of weeks at a place called Polyface Farm. We're going to be doing a long lecture there at Polyface with Dr. Thomas Cohen and some other really bright folks. So if you can make it, it's a great venue, and you could maybe come and meet me in person, say hi. So Spirit is asking, hi doc, I use your B Complete. I see you have a MTHFR blend. Should I take one or the other or both? I do have MTHFR gene. If you're using my B Complete, you don't necessarily need to add MTHFR to that, even if you have like a genetic MTHFR SNP or polymorphism. So point being, if you're using B Complete, if you're taking 2 to 3 of those a day, that should give you folate. It should give you all the B vitamins in combination. The reason I have a specific methylfolate blend is because some people that have autoimmune disease or gluten-related autoimmune disease are on medicines like methotrexate, where they're actually inhibiting or depleting their folate. So the drug itself causes the deficiency of folate. So we want to give them an extra amount. We want to give them more to compensate for what that medicine is doing. So that's one of the reasons. One of the other reasons why is during pregnancy, some women need more folate and have a history of delivering babies with birth defects or neural tube defects. So that's where more folate might be. Adding that on might be a good option. So Paul's asking, if you take 3 doses of 1,500 milligrams and you get a flush every time you take that dose, and you do that for a month, and then you reduce it to 500 milligrams per dosage and you get the same flush, does that mean you should stop supplementing the B3? No, it doesn't necessarily. Well, it doesn't mean that you should keep taking it, and it doesn't mean that you should stop taking it. I mean, a big part of it is why are you taking it? So, I mean, it depends on why you're taking it and how you determined that you needed, long-term mega doses of vitamin B3. I'm not a big fan of long-term mega dosing of any supplement without justification. So, Paul, it depends on how that you got to that justification for doing that. Let's see here. Mary, Doc, I take your vitamin C, your Detox C, every time I feel an onset of an allergy attack. The Detox C really helps to minimize the allergic reactions. I'm glad. Thanks for sharing that, Mary. I'm glad that's helpful for you. Vitamin C is a mast cell stabilizer, so a lot of people that have allergy response, vitamin C works really, really well at reducing their symptoms. I'm not sure of your question, Marcus. Do we offer severe corn allergy? What's the best to talk to a doctor about? If you're asking about how to test for corn allergy, yeah, that can be tested for. There are a number of different tests, though, because allergy, there's 6 different ways your immune system can react to a food. And so there's IgE, there's IgG, IgA, IgM, immune complex, and T-cell response, types of reactions that can all occur. So ask your doctor for all of those if you're trying to get that tested. So this is a great question. Are niacin, non-flush niacin, and time-release niacin the same in impact? How are they different? So if we're talking about non-flush niacin, in my experience, it is not as good. Clinically, it just doesn't work as well. Niacin is where it's at. Now, if you're talking about time-release niacin, it works just as good in my experience as regular niacin that's not time-released. The big difference is the time-release somewhat delays or minimizes the flush. So the whole point of the time-release is that slow trickle the niacin in so that you're not getting a heavy of enough dose at one point in time to have a big flushing response. So I tried niacin to lower triglycerides. It did not change. Is there a dose that is effective? Upwards of 500 milligrams, so 500 to 1,000 milligrams, and sometimes even higher. But if you're going to do that, you really should work with somebody to monitor your liver function. But I would say if it's not changing, if your triglycerides are not changing, it's probably because they're not massively high enough that niacin is going to be the right move. Most people have high triglycerides. So if you have high triglycerides, it's probably because, well, I don't know. I'm just making a huge assumption here about you, and I could be totally wrong because I don't know what your diet's like. But high carbohydrate diets, triglycerides are fat, right? So triglycerides are fat. Carbs, people don't think that carbs and fats like match. But what happens is when your carbohydrate's too high, your body will convert it into triglycerides. And so what happens is a lot of people are like 60, 70 plus % carbohydrates in their diet. And so they're hammering their liver to convert all that excessive carb into triglycerides. This is a big cause of it right here is carbohydrate. Not overeating fat, not eating too much animal meat, but just over-consuming pastas and breads and cereals and cakes and cookies and carbohydrate-laden food. Even the grain-free versions like the arrowroot and the tapioca and the cassava, these are all heavy carbohydrate that can do this too. So if what you might consider, instead of just using niacin to try to reduce it, I mean, unless you have like a familial genetic hypertriglyceridemia, which is pretty rare, then you should look at your diet, and that may be part of what's happening too. So just a suggestion to look into. Let's see. How come other B vitamins are not labeled as B vitamins? In what regard? Not sure I understand your question. Some ingredients with alcohol have corn. Yes, that's true. A lot of your alcohols are derivative of corn and grains. Let's see. Alice is asking how much niacin to take. Alice, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, you can get a decent 50 milligrams of niacin is ample enough for most people in a day to make sure that there's not a deficiency that's going to develop. So I would tend to err on the lower side, not the higher side. So you don't necessarily need to go up to that 250, that 500 milligram dosing structure that a lot of people who are mega dosing it are doing. So again, if we're talking about just daily use and a good multivitamin, anywhere between really 20 and 100 milligrams would be in split dosing over the course of that multivitamin over several meals would be adequate. Does niacin flush affect the incidence of AFib? What is the high limit for niacin for a poor methylator? So niacin, it's not about whether you're a poor methylator or not, and I've not seen niacin clinically increase anyone's AFib, and so it doesn't, at least not in my experience. So haven't seen that be the culprit. Let's see here. Is there gluten in contact lenses? This is where I wouldn't say there's probably, I haven't seen any case where I've seen gluten as an active ingredient in contact lenses. I have seen cases where there were grain-based extracts in contact lens cleaners. So best kind of rule of thumb is to read the bottle on your cleaner and make sure that you're not getting that exposure. Do B vitamin deficiencies make you more sensitive to EMFs? No. B vitamin deficiencies, in my experience, do not make you necessarily more sensitive to EMFs. They may make you less protected, if that makes sense. So B vitamin deficiency doesn't make you react more because B vitamin deficiency is somehow linked to EMF. But remember, B vitamins help you protect your DNA, help protect your RNA, help protect your cells from being damaged. And so if EMF is a culprit that you're being exposed to regularly and repeatedly, it could potentially lower your B vitamin status, and so that therefore your symptoms would increase. But B vitamin deficiencies don't. You understand my gist. It's not that B vitamin deficiency causes the symptoms. The EMF is causing the symptoms. The B vitamin deficiency is just not allowing your body to protect yourself as well. Has niacin got any link to neuralgia, paresthetica, fatigue, and sleep disorders? Definitely fatigue. I think I answered that earlier. And definitely sleep dysfunction. Remember that that under certain circumstances that niacin, remember that to make niacin requires or can require tryptophan, but also to make serotonin requires tryptophan. So you have this competitive. Is that tryptophan going to be used in your body to make B6 or rather B3 niacin, or is it going to be used to make serotonin? And a big part of that is body need. So if you've got a body need shifting more toward niacin, you might have by default a reduction in your capacity to generate adequate serotonin. And this is one of the reasons why we think niacin deficiency can cause mood disorders and depression. It has to do with the favorability of using tryptophan. Instead of producing serotonin, we use tryptophan to produce vitamin B3. Let's see here. What's the difference between niacin, nicotinic acid, niacinamide, nicotinamide? I think I answered that question earlier. Let's keep going down. As far as explaining neuropathy, Elizabeth, that's in detail for a whole show. We've got a show queued up for neuropathy actually in the next month or so. So make sure you register to get that reminder. We'll be talking in depth about neuropathy. So if you're suffering from diarrhea, can that possibly indicate a B3 shortage? It could, but are there other possibilities? Remember, there's a lot of things that can cause diarrhea. And so parasite can cause diarrhea. Abnormal bacterial or fungal growth in your GI tract can cause diarrhea. Low levels of healthy microbiome microorganisms like Bifidobacter and Lactobacillus can cause diarrhea. Other nutrient deficiencies can cause diarrhea. Gluten exposure can cause diarrhea. So lots of things can, and that's why it's important. If you're struggling, you don't know why, it's important to work with somebody who understands the complexity of all those different things and can measure those to rule out which one is causing yours. What's my opinion on home food sensitivity tests? Most of them are highly, do I say highly enough? Highly inaccurate and misleading. Most of them are IgG, and IgG tests are extremely notorious for creating a false positive. So you actually become allergic, or your test results say that you're allergic to far more than what you're actually allergic to, leading you to a massive scale diet restriction that may not be necessary, and in that regard can create malnourishment because you limit your food to such a great degree. So I'm not a big fan of these home test kits. These are just, in my opinion, these are shark companies trying to take advantage of people to rule things out, and they don't understand the technology, or they wouldn't even offer it as a service without explaining the comprehensive nature of what they're offering. Let's see. Will the doctor know what B3 should be with a lymphocyte proliferation test? I don't know, Betty. That's a great question. Look, I'm one of less than 400 doctors in the world that actually have a diplomate with the American Clinical Board of Nutrition. What is that? That's a board certification. Just like your internal medicine doctor is board certified, your GI doctor is board certified GI, your neurologist is board certified with the Board of Neurology. There aren't very many of us that are board certified in nutrition. It's not a first of all, it's not an easy field to get into. In my opinion, it's one of the more challenging fields to get into because you have to understand biochemistry to a much higher level. But it's just not a field that most doctors want to pursue. It's not glamorous. I think it's super glamorous. I think it's really super glamorous. But again, you've got to love biochemistry, and I'm kind of a dork that way, or a geek that way. I live, breathe, and eat this stuff. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Most doctors don't understand this stuff to any great degree. I mean, nutrition is just not taught in med school. I love this, Carolee. I'm a former patient of Dr. Hoffer, so I love that you are. Now, if you've been taking niacin for 30 years or more because of like something Dr. Hoffer was treating you for, like schizophrenia, and you've developed fatty liver, the question is that niacin what's created that fatty liver, or is there something else going on? I will make this point, Carolee. If you're being treated for a mental disorder using niacin, and it's probably something in the schizoaffective family of disorders, and you should understand that gluten is notorious. That one of the oldest known forms of gluten sensitivity is also known as bread madness. And that's because gluten can act as a psychoactive substance in the brain. And there are a number of great research studies that have linked gluten to causation, or to actually creating or causing schizophrenia. Now, gluten can also cause fatty liver disease. So you might be taking niacin in effect to kind of help a particular situation, but missing a bigger key point, which is if you haven't changed your diet, that could be also contributing to that liver issue. I'd recommend No Grain, No Pain. Read it and follow the diet for 30 days. Have your doctor measure and monitor your liver enzymes and see if you get improvement. So Tara's asking about what type or quantity of niacin do you recommend for LPA? LPA, that stands for lipoprotein little a, and that there is no You can't lower lipoprotein A using niacin. Lipoprotein A is one of the few types of lipids or cholesterol markers that cannot be manipulated, as far as we know, at least not yet, by diet. I've seen it come down a little bit with vitamin C, but you've got to go really, really high, and so like 10 grams a day to get any kind of reduction in lipoprotein A. And when you're doing that, the reduction has, in my experience anyway, hasn't been significant enough to justify using high doses of vitamin D indefinitely. Lipoprotein A is a relatively low risk lipid as long as your other cardiovascular inflammatory markers are within normal range. So I'd really look at homocysteine, C-reactive protein, your triglyceride levels, your insulin, your A1C, all those as very important, your vitamin D and your other nutrients as markers to help you understand what your real cardiovascular inflammatory risks are. And so again, focusing on cholesterol, including lipoprotein A, in my opinion, it's the wrong thing to focus on. It's not that you can't be concerned about it, it's just that most people have overblown their fear and their concern about those cholesterol markers. If you are celiac, will you be exposed transdermally to gluten by working in an Italian restaurant which serves pizza and pasta? Possibly. Actually, interesting story, Karen. Had a patient one time who worked next door to a bakery, and this patient was celiac, and they were sharing the same air duct with the bakery next door. It was a strip mall. And anyway, he was breathing in wheat dust, and it was making him perpetually sick until we figured out, hey, the air ducts are shared, you're getting wheat dust. And once we got him relocated, he didn't have a problem anymore. So it's possible working in that pizzeria might give you enough cross-contamination. I'd say especially if you're working in the kitchen area, and if they're using, depends on how they make their dough in the pizzeria. So like a lot of them, they hand toss the wheat flour and they hand toss it. So you got wheat particulate going up into the air, and in essence aerosolizing, which makes it easier for you to breathe it in. So I would be concerned. That would be one of the concerns I might have. Does tapioca or hemp cross-react with gluten? No, not to any great degree. Nothing that's been researched that shows that those are cross-reactive. Is niacin linked to Charcot-Marie tooth disease? It's linked indirectly, but not directly. So it's not niacin per se that causes Charcot-Marie tooth as much as Charcot-Marie tooth can increase your need for niacin. Let's keep going down. Go back up just a little bit right there. So Linda, is psoriasis an expression of slow or stagnant lymph movement? Not in my experience, Linda. Psoriasis is more of an expression of an immunoreactive illness where your immune system is producing antibodies that can damage the skin and lead to that psoriatic outcome. Psoriasis, if the diagnosis is accurate, psoriasis is autoimmune, and it's in that same family as psoriatic arthritis. So my experience, most cases of psoriasis I've ever seen were largely not linked to that, but more specifically that were linked to the wrong food, the wrong dietary components as a trigger for the autoimmune process. So dermatitis is it being used to describe a specific type of rash, or is it being used more generally in the context of deficiency and can have lots of different appearances? Exactly, bingo, that's exactly right. It's being used generically in the context of inflammation of the skin, but not specifically, biopsy diagnosed, this is pellagra, because that really doesn't even exist. Does niacin cause gout or numb feet? No, niacin does not cause gout. Uric acid crystal deposition in your joints causes gout. Niacin does not cause numb feet. Can you take a B vitamin complex daily, or is 3 times per week sufficient? It depends, Becky, on you as a person. Everybody's unique and different. It depends. So it depends on what your diet is. It depends on the level of alcohol that you drink. It depends on the level of processed foods or sugar or candy or sweets that you might consume as well. Remember, any carbohydrate that's high, excessive carbohydrates deplete B vitamins as a general rule of thumb. So if you're elevated carbohydrate intake, then you're more apt to become vitamin B deficient. If we're speculating. Let's see here. I love that. So Doc Shooter says, or Mike from Thousand Oaks, California, love watching your master classes. I've learned so much and started applying what you've taught with great or good success. I like hearing that. You know, that positive feedback really feeds me. So thanks for sharing that. And if you're referring to our glutenology master class, maybe pop that link up. If those of you who haven't watched it, or it's free. I made it available. It's 14 hours and based on 20 years of clinical experience and actual real doctoring. But it's not your local nutritionist who took a weekend course. Hi, I'm Dr. Peter Osborne, founder of Gluten-Free Society and author of the international best-selling book, No Grain, No Pain. You might recognize me from my appearances on Fox, PBS, Netflix, and many other nationally recognized publications. I am super passionate about helping those with gluten sensitivity, and that's why I dedicated so many resources to creating Glutenology, the ultimate masterclass on going gluten-free. Now, this class is more than just a tutorial on how to go on a gluten-free diet. It is jam-packed with 14 hours of information, broken down into 10 simple-to-understand modules. You may not know this, but researchers have found that as many as 92%. My 22-year-old son's feet are red all the time, sitting, lying, standing. Could this be a niacin deficiency? You know, it's worthwhile ruling it out, Christine. I would definitely, have the doc run the right tests to see if there's a niacin or a B vitamin deficit leading to that. But redness of the feet too. It could be other things. There is, generally a redness of the skin. It's like the skin is scalding or has a red-like appearance. There are a number of different things that can cause that. Certainly niacin is one of them, but there are others as well. Growing pains in kids. I tell you what I've seen with growing pains in kids more than anything else is gluten. Gluten is notorious. I've seen countless cases of children suffering horrific growing pains, and when we change their diet, the growing pains go away. So I would say gluten is probably, in my opinion, a much more likely culprit in that regard. With the IgG test, is it true that it can show positive for a sensitivity if you eat that food frequently, even if you're really not? Yes, it can. And that the reason why, Nicole, is because IgG antibodies, when we make them, we have antibodies that we make that are friendly antibodies, meaning they're protective. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that we're reacting to the food. These are just protective antibodies. And most lab tests don't differentiate between protective antibodies and damaging antibodies. And this is one of the fundamental flaws in IgG testing and online testing. Is again, these guys, in my opinion, many of these companies are vultures. They're out, you're spending your good money on a test that gives you results that are highly inaccurate. And and you're out the money, but you don't have a solid result which you can rely on to do anything tangible or improve. Let's see, keep scrolling. Does B3 have anything to do with Raynaud's syndrome? Not so much. Raynaud's is an autoimmune condition, and so just like all other forms of autoimmunity, there are 4 primary triggers, right? There's microorganism triggers, there's nutritional deficit triggers, there's food triggers, and there's chemical triggers. And Raynaud's, one of the most common triggers I've seen, is protozoal parasites playing a role in that. Can alcohol be good for you? That's a great question, Timster. I don't know. I do know alcohol can be good for you under certain situations. I would say, when is alcohol good for you? When is alcohol good for you? Alcohol is good for you when the stress of your life is so great that it's doing more damage to your health than the relief that alcohol might provide temporarily. So that doesn't mean solve your problems with alcohol. I'm certainly not encouraging anyone to drink to solve their problems or to blunt their problems. But there are times and occasions where, just like with certain medications, that getting temporary relief to improve your quality of life in this very short-term window can be helpful, and sometimes more helpful. It's what we call hormesis. It's when you do something that damages the body, but at the same time helps the body, and that help outweighs the damage, right? And so that's a scenario where alcohol might be good for you. Again, very small window of opportunity increments, because beyond that, alcohol is a neurotoxin. It's a liver toxin. It depletes your vitamins and your minerals. It's a diuretic. It just isn't good as an overall drink to consume in large quantities. Again, I think large quantities, there's also a key word to focus in on. So that's what I was talking about. Somebody's asking about B3 megadosing for longevity and the length of telomeres. So telomeres are like the end caps to your DNA. And so your telomeres have a certain length, and we can actually measure the length of your telomeres, and that helps us to understand how long you're going to live, or at least predict how long you're going to live. And so we can increase your telomere length when we do healthy things, right? So when we sleep well, when we exercise, when we eat right, we can actually increase our telomere length. Well, there's some research going on right now about niacin, or vitamin B3, or forms of niacin actually improving longevity and lifespan by increasing telomere length. Remember what I said earlier, showed you on the board that one of niacin's jobs, okay, as a general rule of thumb, is the preservation and the protection and the repair of your DNA. So if we're talking about telomeres again, the end caps of your DNA. So I don't think it's a myth. I just think probably many supplement companies are overstating the efficacy of that by itself to solve your aging problem. Most people have, they're not aging gracefully, not because they need a special supplement to increase the length of their telomeres. They're not aging gracefully because they don't take good care of themselves and they don't take an active role in their health. And so no pill's going to solve that. Let's see here. Is it true there are over 600 plant non-nutritive amino acids? No. There's arguably 20 to 22 amino acids in total. So I don't know where you heard 600 amino acids from, but no, not when we're talking about human physiology. There's some would say 22, some would say 20, depending on who you ask, but that's about it for amino acids. Let's see here. Scroll down on the left for me. We're going to wrap it up here because I think we're just about out of time. We're laughing about the alcohol. I love that. You should be laughing because, we all do it from time to time to take the edge off. Okay, I grew up with growing pails. That's what they call it. Wish I would have known that when it was grains. I'm not sure I understand what your comment there is, Deb. Can I use working in the garden 3 acres of food for my exercise? Yes and no. It depends on how aggressive that exercise is. So if you're out in the garden, if you're growing a massive garden, several acres, and you're out there weeding every day for several hours and working and walking, I like to look at exercises, the accumulation of about 5 miles of movement in the course of your day, but then also something that challenges your muscles. But it doesn't have to be 90 minutes in a gym. If you're doing farmer carries where you're carrying bales of water, or not bales, but pails of water, or you're carrying, we do this with our animals on the farm, we carry buckets of feed and things of that nature to them. So, you're doing some physical labor. It just depends on the level of physical labor that you're actually doing. Some people overstate their physical labor because they're out of shape. But the more you do, the more in shape you get. So then, again, with exercise, it becomes find new ways to challenge your coordination and find new ways to challenge yourself with exercise. Otherwise, what happens is your body adjusts to what you do every day, and then your benefit starts to diminish. Have I done a class on cross-reactive foods? Yes, Sue, I have. And again, that's the link. We put it up in the feed to my master class. So I had an entire episode on cross-reactive foods and foods that mimic gluten or gluten mimicry. Okay, we got to wrap this up. Last question, is psyllium husk okay to eat? Sure. Psyllium husk is a good source of fiber. Just make sure it's organic, Randall. But as a fiber, yeah, it's a good source. Is real food a better source than a supplemental psyllium? It is. So try to get your fiber through real food. I would say just prioritize real food, and if it's still, you find yourself falling short of fiber, psyllium husk organically is a great way. We actually have something called ultra fiber, which has psyllium husk in it and other things in it as well. All right, folks, we're 15 minutes past the hour, so a little bit past due here. Thanks for spending Monday evening with me. I hope you learned something. Look, if I haven't, I've done my job if you've learned something, and I haven't if you haven't. So I hope you come here every Monday and learn something new. If you want to keep learning and you want to keep coming back, maybe you're new to the show, do me a favor. Go visit me at glutenfreesociety.org. Glutenfreesociety.org. There's just a little tab in the halfway down the page. It says sign up for the world's #1 gluten-free newsletter. If you want to learn more about what we do with diet, and you want to learn more about education around nutrition, and you want to get notified every time we do a live show with a live Q&A, sign up for our list. It's the only way we can guarantee that you won't be censored. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel or our Facebook group, look, they control and they manipulate my channel all the time. They don't show what we publish most of the time to most of the people who have asked us, who have asked for that information. So the best way to get the information from me without it being censored is to go to glutenfreesociety.org and make sure you're on my newsletter, because that's the least censored mechanism by which I can deliver information consistently to you. So, hey, if you know somebody that could benefit from tonight's lesson, from tonight's show, hey, do me a favor. Remember, save 100 million lives is what we're about, and I can't save 100 million if we have a limited audience who is stingy with the information. So share it, right? Share it and hashtag save 100 million lives. You hashtag that for me. That way we can find it and know just how far our reach is spreading in the world. So again, thanks for spending Monday night with me. We'll see you next Monday for another episode of Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Have a great week. Hey, don't forget to tune in next week, same time, 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, for another Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain show. Bring all your toughest health questions to me. I look forward to answering them. And before you leave today, make sure you hit subscribe. And once you do, click that bell. That bell is going to allow us to remind you right before we go live. But it's also going to allow us to remind you when we come out with other video content all week long. We've got lots of episodes coming your way all week long, and I don't want you to miss anything. So again, subscribe, hit that bell so that you can get notified when we have that new information put up for you. Thanks so much, and I'm wishing you excellent health. Have a great week. We'll see you next Monday night.